You there? He shouted, his voice breaking through the quiet night like a thunderclap. You, my own flesh and blood. You betrayed me in the most vile way. Obinna fell to his knees, trembling. Father, please forgive me. But there was no forgiveness in Ezedike's heart that night. He turned to the gods. His hands lifted towards the heavens, and his voice ranged with a power no one had ever heard before. I curse you, Obinna. You and your descendant shall never be free. From this day forward, you will live in the shadows, forever bound to serve your brother and his descendants. Your name will be forgotten, and your bloodline will wear the mark of slaves. Obinna wept, clutching at his father's feet, but the curse has already taken root. The sky above them darkened, and the cold wind swept through the kingdom as if the gods themselves were bearing witness. You're specially welcome to Queen Ama's Tales. This is the most thrilling and intriguing story that you would listen to this week. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you. The land of Umunna was a prosperous one, blessed by the gods with fertile soil, gentle rivers, and thick forests that provided everything the people needed. At the heart of the kingdom stood the great palace of Chief Ezedike, a man known far and wide for his wisdom, strength, and his deep love for his people. His home, however, carried a sadness that shadowed his every smile. It has been 5 years since Nkiru, his beloved wife, passed away, leaving him with their 2 sons, Obinna and Chibuzo. Nkiru had been the light of his life, a woman with a heart as large as the ocean, and her absence was felt not just by Ezedike, but by the entire kingdom. Obinna, the firstborn, had inherited his father's strength and leadership, but his heart was like a storm, unpredictable and wild. He was a man who lived in the moment, often letting his passion guide him rather than his wisdom. Chibuzo, the younger son, was the opposite. He was calm, thoughtful, and deeply reflective, a boy who spent more time in the sacred grove praying to the gods than in the marketplace. As Ezedike grew older, the loneliness of his wife's absence ground at him, and he realized the kingdom needed a woman's touch once more. After much deliberation and pressure from the council of elders, he decided to remarry. His new wife, Nneka, was young and radiant, her beauty unmatched by anyone in Umunna. Her arrival brought a sense of renewal to Ezedike's life, and for a time, the household was at peace. But peace in Umunna was fleeting, for beneath the surface, trouble brewed. Obinna, Chief's first son, watched Nneka with eyes that betrayed a longing he could not understand, let alone control. From the moment she entered their home, her presence unsettled him. She was beautiful, too beautiful, with skin the color of roasted palm nuts and eyes that seemed to see right through him. Her laughter filled the compound, and her graceful movements captivated everyone. But Obinna felt something more, a dangerous pull towards her. He tried to resist it at first, turning away whenever her gaze met with his. He prayed to the gods, begging his ancestors to remove the thoughts from his mind, but they persisted. The forbidding nature of his feeling only made them stronger. One fateful evening, when the moon hung low in the sky and the village was asleep, Obinna found himself walking towards the hut where Nneka slept. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of night blooming flowers. He stood outside her doorway, heart pounding, knowing he should turn back, but unable to. Inside, Nneka sat, her eyes catching the soft glow of the moonlight. When she saw Obinna, she didn't scream or shout. Instead, her lip curled into a smile that told him she had been waiting. Obinna, without another word, crossed the threshold, his hands trembling as he reached for her. Ezedike couldn't sleep that night. His bones ached as they often did in his old age, and the stillness of the night left him restless. He decided to walk through the compound, hoping the cool air would bring him peace. As he neared Nneka's hut, however, he saw something that stood him in his tracks. There, through the small opening of the door, he saw his son, his first son, entangled with his wife. A roar of fury erupted from his chest, loud enough to wake his spirit. Obinna and Nneka sprang apart, terror in their eyes, but it was too late. Ezedike's face twisted in rage and betrayal as he advanced on them. "You there?" he shouted, his voice breaking through the quiet night like a thunderclap. "You, my own flesh and blood. You betray me in the most vile way." Obinna fell to his knees, trembling. "Father, please, please forgive me." But there was no forgiveness in Ezedike's heart that night. He turned to the gods, his hands lifted towards the heavens, and his voice ranged with a power no one had ever heard before. "I curse you, Obinna. You and your descendants shall never be free. From this day forward, you will live in the shadows, forever bound to serve your brother and his descendants. Your name will be forgotten, and your bloodline will wear the marks of slaves." Obinna wept, clutching at his father's feet, but the curse had already taken root. The sky above them darkened, and a cold wind swept through the kingdom as if the gods themselves were bearing witness. Nneka, stricken with shame and guilt, fled the kingdom that very night, never to be seen again. The curse split Umunna into two clans, the Nwokike and the Amadi. From that day onward, Obinna's bloodline, now the Amadi, lived under the weight of their shame. They became slaves to Chibuzo descendants, the Nwokike. The Amadi wore only black clothing, a symbol of their servitude, and were forbidden from owning lands, marrying outside their clan, or participating in any of the kingdom's celebration. Chibuzo, though heartbroken by his brother's fate, obeyed their father's will. He became the leader of the freeborn Nwokike, but his heart carried the burden of Obinna's betrayal. The two brothers, once close, now lived worlds apart within the same kingdom, their destinies forever entwined in pain and sorrow. The years passed, and the curse Ezedike had laid upon Obinna bloodline grew heavier with each generation. Umuna kingdom was no longer the peaceful place it once was. A deep line had been drawn between the Nwokike and the Amadi. The Nwokike, blessed by their free-born status, lived in prosperity. Their homes were large, their clothes were bright and colorful, adorned with beads and fine clothes woven from silk. Their children were educated and they held position of power in the kingdom. The Amadis, on the other hand, wore the mark of servitude. Their homes were small and clustered at the edge of the kingdom, hidden away from the vibrant heart of Umunna. They wore only black, simple and rough clothes that made them stand out wherever they went. They were not allowed to attend the kingdom's festivals, and they could not own land or participate in council meetings. The curse had shackled them to a life of silence and obedience. Yet, within the Amadi, a quiet strength endured. They became master blacksmiths, artisans whose skill were unmatched in the kingdom. They crafted the finest tools, weapons and ornaments, but none could escape the chains of their birth. Despite their talent, they were slaves to the Nwokike, forever bound by a curse they did not deserve. Ikenna, the son of Igwe Obieze, chief of the Nwokike's clan, stood at the edge of his father's compound, watching the sunset. He was a young man of great promise, tall and strong, with eyes that held the wisdom of someone far beyond his years. From a young age, Ikenna had been groomed to take over his father's leadership, to guide the Nwokike in the way of prosperity and power. But Ikenna's heart was different from those before him. While many of the Nwokike accepted the curse placed upon the Amadi without question, Ikenna was not so easily swayed. He often wandered to the edge of the kingdom, observing the Amadi as they worked, wondering why the sins of their ancestors should still bind them. One evening, as he walked near the river that separated the land of the freeborn and the slaves, he saw a young woman from the Amadi clan. Her back was to him as she gathered herbs along the river bank. Her movements were graceful, and her quiet determination drew him closer. She was not like the other Amadi he had seen from afar. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was something deeper, a quiet strength that made him stood in his tracks. Amaka was the daughter of Onyedike, one of the finest blacksmiths in Umuna. Though her family lived in the shadow of servitude, they carried a fierce pride in their crafts. Amaka had grown up hearing stories of the curse that bound her people to the Nwokike. And though she accepted her place in the world, she harbored a deep longing for freedom. Amaka was known in Amadi clan for her wisdom and her skills in herbal medicine. She often spent her days at the riverbank, gathering plants and flowers that she would later turn into medicine for her people. On this particular evening, she was lost in her thoughts, her hands busy plucking the leaves of the otazi plant, when she sensed someone watching her. When she turned around, her eyes met Ikenna, For a moment, she seemed to stand still. She had seen him before, the heir to the Nwokike throne, but never had their paths crossed like this. Do you need something, Nwokike? She asked, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. Ikenna took a step closer, his gaze locked on hers. I've seen you here before, he said softly, but I never knew your name. Amaka straightened her chin, lifting slightly. I am Amaka, the daughter of Onyedike. Her words were simple, but there was a quiet defiance in her tone. She did not bow or lower her eyes as other Amadi did when speaking to the freeborn. Instead, she looked at him directly, as if challenging him to see her not as a slave but as an equal. Ikenna felt something stir within him, something he had never felt before. I am Ikenna, he said, though he knew she already knew his name. What are you doing here so late? I gather herbs for my people, she replied, turning back to the river bank. The sun may be setting, but my work does not end with it. Her response left him speechless for a moment. He watched as she continued her task, her hands moving swiftly and expertly over the plants. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, and he found himself drawn to her strength and her independence. May I walk with you? He asked. Amaka hesitated. She had never known a Nwokike to ask permission to do anything, let alone to walk beside an Amadi. But something in Ikenna's eyes made her nod. Over the weeks that followed, Ikenna found reasons to visit the riverbank more often, and each time he sought out Amaka. They spoke of many things, their people, their hopes, and their dreams. Slowly, a bond formed between them, one that went beyond the boundaries of their clan. Amaka too felt the pull of their connection. Though she knew the danger it posed, a love between a freeborn and a slave was not only forbidden, it was dangerous. If anyone in the Nwokike clan found out, the consequences would be severe, not just for her, but for Ikenna as well. Despite the risk, their meetings became more frequent, their conversations more personal. Ikenna began to question the curse that had held their people captive for so long. Why should the sins of the past dictate the future? Why should love be bound by a curse that none of them had a hand in creating? But the more time they spent together, the more dangerous their love became. As whispers began to spread through the kingdom, it became clear that their secret would not stay hidden for long. The first sign of trouble came when Nnamdi, Ikenna's older cousin, began to notice Ikenna's frequent trip to the river. Nnamdi was a man who craved power, one who believed that the division between the Nwokike and the Amadi was sacred and should never be questioned. He had long desired to rise in power, and he saw Ikenna's growing attachment to Amadi as a threat to his ambitions. One afternoon, as Ikenna returned from yet another visit to the riverbank, Nnamdi cornered him in the palace courtyard. Ikenna, Nnamdi began, his voice dripping with forced concern. You've been spending a lot of time away from the compound. The people are starting to talk. Ikenna narrowed his eyes. Is that so, cousin? And what exactly are they saying? They say you've been consulting with a slave girl, Nnamdi spat, his eyes gleaming with malice. A disgrace to our bloodline. You know what that means, don't you? Ikenna felt his heart race. He knew Nnamdi was not just trying to warn him, he was threatening him. I spend my time as I see fit, Ikenna replied coldly, and I will not have my actions dictated by gossips. Nnamdi smiled, stepping closer. Be careful, cousin. If the elders hear of this, you may find yourself stripped of more than just your freedom. As the day passed, the bond between Ikenna and Amaka deepened. Their meetings by the river bank more frequent, and with each encounter their feelings grew stronger. But the love came the heavy burden of secrecy. The shadows of the curse loomed over them, a constant reminder of the barriers that stood between them. Amaka, though she had fallen deeply for Ikenna, could not shake the fear that their love would bring ruin upon both of their families. She knew all too well the consequences of defying the laws of the kingdom. The Amadi were bound by the curse to serve the Nwokike, and any hint of rebellion, even in love, could mean death. Ikenna, we cannot continue like this, Amaka whispered one evening as they sat by the river bank. Their hands intertwined. The moonlight danced on the water, casting long shadows around them. Ikenna looked at her, his heart heavy. Amaka, I would give up everything to be with you. The laws of our people are unjust. Why should we suffer from the mistakes of our ancestors? Amaka shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. You are the heir to the Nwokike, Ikenna. You cannot throw away your birthright for someone like me, a slave. If your father finds out, if the elders find out, I don't care about the throne. Ikenna's voice broke, filled with frustration. What good is power if it means living a life without you, Amaka? Amaka's heart ached at his words, but she knew the reality of their situation. The kingdom would never allow a freeborn and a slave to be together, and the cost of defying that law could destroy them both. Still, in her heart, she could not deny her love for him. Meanwhile, Nnamdi's suspicions continued to grow. He watched Ikenna closely, waiting for the moment when he could expose his cousin's secret and ruin him. Nnamdi was ambitious, and he had long envied Ikenna's position as the heir to the Nwokike clan. If Ikenna fell from grace, Nnamdi knew he could rise to power in his place. One afternoon, while Ikenna was away from the palace, Nnamdi approached Igwe Obieze in the great hall. The old chief was seated on his throne, his face lined with age and wisdom. Though Igwe Obieze was still strong, his health began to wane in recent years, and many believed that the time for a new leader was near. Igwe, Nnamdi began, bowing respectfully before his uncle. There is something I must bring to your attention. It concerns Ikenna. Obieze looked up, his eyes narrowing. What is it, Nnamdi? Speak. Nnamdi hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Ikenna has been spending much time outside the compound, away from his duties. There are rumors circulating among the people, rumors that he has been consulting with an Amadi woman. The chief's expression darkened, his grip tightening on the arm of his throne. An Amadi woman? Do you know who she is? Nnamdi nodded. Her name is Amaka, the daughter of Onyedike, the blacksmith. I have seen them together by the river. Obieze's face twisted in anger. This cannot be true. Ikenna knows the consequences of such action. He would not be so foolish. I thought the same, Igwe, Nnamdi continued, his voice low and smooth. But I fear he has allowed his heart to lead him astray. If this continues, it could bring shame upon our clan and weaken your legacy, my king. The chief sat in silence for a moment, his mind racing. He could not allow Ikenna to endanger the future of the Nwokike clan, nor could he tolerate such a disgraceful union. The curse that had divided their people for generations was sacred, and it was not to be questioned or defiled. I will speak with Ikenna, Obieze said finally, his voice heavy with authority. But this must remain between us for now. Do not speak of it to anyone else. Nnamdi bowed once more, a satisfied smile playing at the corner of his mouth. As you wish, Igwe. The tension in the air was palpable when Ikenna returned to the palace that evening. His father, Igwe Obieze, was waiting for him in the great hall, his expression thin and unyielding. Ikenna sensed that something was wrong the moment he stepped inside. Ikenna, his father's voice boomed through the hall. We need to talk. Ikenna approached cautiously, his heart sinking. He could feel the weight of his father's anger before a word was even spoken. I have heard troubling rumors, Obieze continues, his eyes boring into Ikenna's. Rumors that you have been seeing an Amadi woman. Ikenna's heart pounded in his chest. He had known this day would come, but it didn't make it any easier. Father, silence, Obieze thundered. Do you understand what this means? You are the heir to the Nwokike. You cannot tarnish our bloodline with a slave girl. The curse that binds the Amadi is sacred, and you know the laws. But father, Ikenna began, his voice trembling with emotion. The cost is unjust. Amaka is not to blame for the sins of their ancestors. Why should we continue to punish her and her people for something that had happened long ago? Obieze's face hardened. Because it is the will of the gods. We are bound by tradition, Ikenna. You will not question it. Ikenna clenched his fists, fighting back the frustration that threatened to overwhelm him. What kind of tradition condemns love? What kind of law forces us to live in hatred and division? The kind that keeps the kingdom in order, Obieze roared, rising to his feet. You will end this foolishness with the Amadi girl, or I will strip you of your title and your birthright. Do you understand me? Ikenna stared at his father in disbelief. The weight of his word crashed on him, but deep inside, he knew he could not abandon Amaka. Not now, not ever. I understand, Ikenna said finally, his voice low. But I cannot do what you ask. The silence that followed was deafening. Obieze's face twisted in rage, and for a moment, Ikenna feared that his father might strike him. But instead, the old chief turned away, his shoulders shaking with fury. Then you are no longer my son, Obieze said coldly, his back to Ikenna. Leave this place. You are banished from the Nwokike clan until you come to your senses. Ikenna stood frozen, his heart breaking at his father's words. banished, cast out from the only home he had ever known. But as painful as it was, he knew that his love for Amaka was worth more than any title or birthright. Without another word, Ikenna turned and walked out of the palace, leaving behind the life he had once known. As the news of Ikenna's banishment spread, whispers of rebellion began to rise among the Amadi. For generations, they had lived in the shadows, bound by the curse that enslaved them to the Nwokike. But now, with one of their own, Amaka, at the center of a forbidden love, hope began to stir in their hearts. Led by Amaka's father, Onyedike, the Amadi began to secretly gather, planning for a day when they would no longer be slaves to the freeborn. They knew that the road to freedom would be long and dangerous, but they could no longer bear the weight of the curse. Amaka, though torn by the consequences of her love for Ikenna, felt a sense of pride in her people's courage. She had never imagined that her love would ignite a flame of rebellion, but now it had. She knew she had to be a part of it. "We cannot remain in chains forever," Onyedike said to the gathered Amadis one evening. "The time has come for us to rise. The curse may have bound us for generations, but is no longer stronger than our will. We will fight for our freedom, for our children, and for our future." Amaka stood behind her father, her heart filled with both fear and determination. She knew that the path ahead would be dangerous, but she also knew that she could no longer live in a world where love and freedom were forbidden. With Ikenna banished and the Amadi preparing for rebellion, Amaka and Ikenna knew that their time together was running out. They could not stay in Umunna, where their love was forbidden, nor could they watch as their people were torn apart by war. One evening, under the cover of darkness, Ikenna met Amaka by the riverbank, where their love has first blossomed. "We must leave," Ikenna whispered, his voice urgent. "We cannot stay here any longer. The kingdom will tear itself apart if we do." Amaka's heart raced. "But where will we go? The world beyond Umunna is vast and dangerous." "I don't know," Ikenna admitted. "But I do know that as long as we are together, we can find a way to survive. We can build a life far from the curses and the law that binds us." Tears filled Amaka's eyes as she looked at him. She had never imagined leaving her home, her people, but she knew that their love could not survive in Umunna. If they stayed, they would be hunted down and their love would be destroyed. "Ikenna," she whispered, "I will go with you." And so, under the clock of night, Ikenna and Amaka began their journey, leaving behind the kingdom of Umunna and the curses that had shaped their lives. Back in Umunna, the news of Ikenna's disappearance spread like wildfire. Igwe Obieze was furious. His once proud son, now a fugitive. He had prayed in his heart that Ikenna would come to his senses and plead for mercy, as he only disowned and banished him to scare him. But he never thought that he would really leave the kingdom. Nnamdi, seizing the opportunity, wasted no time in convincing the elders that Ikenna had betrayed the kingdom. "The heir of Nwokike has forsaken his duty," Nnamdi declared before the council. "He has run off with a slave, and in doing so, he has brought shame upon our people. We must find him and bring him back to face justice." The elders, many of whom had grown suspicion of Ikenna's growing sympathy towards the Amadi, agreed. A search party was formed, led by Nnamdi himself, to hunt down Ikenna and Amaka. Nnamdi relished the opportunity to not only eliminate his rival, but also to cement his position as the future leader of the Nwokike clan. As the search party set out, Amaka's father, Onyedike, caught wind of their plan. He knew that if they were caught, both Ikenna and his daughter would face a terrible fate. The rebellion within the Amadi had already begun to stir. And now, with the disappearance of Amaka and Ikenna, it seemed that the time for action was near. As Ikenna and Amaka continued their journey, exhaustion began to take its toll. After several days of travel, they stumbled upon a hidden cave nestled in the side of a hill. The entrance was covered by vines, almost as if the land itself had been protecting the place from discovery. "We will rest here," Ikenna said, leading Amaka inside. The cave was cool and dark, a safe refuge from the dangerous outside. As they settled down, Amaka looked around, her eyes drawn to the strange carving on the wall. Intricate patterns were etched into the stone, telling stories of a time long before their own. There were images of great warriors, healers, and kings, people who had once lived in harmony before the curse had divided them. "These are the stories of our ancestors," Amaka whispered, tracing her fingers along the carvings. "Before the curse, before the division between the freeborn and the slaves, we were one people." Ikenna sat beside her, studying the carving with a frown. "The curse has torn us apart for so long. What if there's a way to break it?" Amaka turned to him, her eyes wild with hope. "Do you really believe that?" "I don't know," Ikenna admitted. "But these carvings, they show a time before the curse. If our ancestors lived in peace once, then maybe we can find a way to do the same." For the first time since they had fled, a glimmer of hope flickered in Amaka's heart. Perhaps their journey wasn't just about escaping Umunna. Perhaps it was about something bigger, about finding a way to heal the wounds of their people. Back in Umunna, Igwe Obieze passed, and tension between the Nwokike and the Amadi reached a boiling point. The Amadi, long oppressed by the curse and the rules of the freeborn, could no longer remain silent. Onyedike, who had always been a quiet leader among his people, now stood at the forefront of the rebellion. "We have been slaves for too long," he declared to a gathering of the Amadi. "The Nwokike have used the curse to keep us bound. But we know the truth. We are not lesser because of our birth. We are not slaves because we are weak. We are strong, and now we must fight for our freedom." The Amadi, who had lived in the shadows for generations, now ready to rise, armed with the weapon they have crafted in secret, they began to prepare for the battle ahead. Onyedike knew that it would not be an easy fight, but he also knew that they had no choice. The curse has taken enough from them. As the rebellion grew, Nnamdi and the Nwokike elders became increasingly alarmed. The Amadi had always been obedient, quiet in their servitude, but now they were threatening the very foundation of their kingdom. Nnamdi, desperate to quench the rebellion before it could take hold, ordered a crackdown on the Amadi. He sent warriors to parole the Amadi quarters, searching for any sign of insurrection. But the Amadi were prepared. They had hidden their weapons, and their plans were shrouded in secrecy. The tension in Umuna grew thicker by the day. The kingdom was on the brink of civil war, and all eyes were on Onyedike as he prepared to lead his people in a fight for freedom. As Ikenna and Amaka rested in the cave, they were unaware of the danger closing in around them. Nnamdi's search party had been relentless, and after days of tracking their movements, they finally found a clue. Footprints leading towards the hills. Nnamdi, driven by his hatred for Ikenna and his desire for power, pushed the men harder. "We will find them," he groaned, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Ikenna will pay for his betrayal, and the girl will be dealt with accordingly." As they followed the trail into the hills, Nnamdi's heart raced with anticipation. He knew that once he captures Ikenna, the throne would be his. The elders would have no choice but to crown him as the next Igwe. All he needed to do was to bring back Ikenna in chains. But as they drew closer to the cave, a sense of unease settled over Nnamdi's men. The hills were silent, too silent, as if the land itself was warning them to turn back. Yet Nnamdi pressed on, his hunger for power blinding him to the dangers ahead. Inside the cave, Ikenna and Amaka were preparing to leave. They had rested long enough, and they knew that the search party would soon be upon them. As they gathered their things, Amaka's heart ached with the weight of everything they had lost. "Do you think we will ever be free?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ikenna wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I don't know, Amaka, but I know that as long as we are together, we will find a way." As they were about to leave the cave, the sounds of footsteps echoed from outside. Ikenna's heart raced. "They found us," he whispered. Without hesitation, Ikenna drew his dagger, standing protectively in front of Amaka. The cave was their last refuge, and he would not let Nnamdi take her from him. As Nnamdi and his men entered the cave, a tense silence fell over the group. Ikenna and Nnamdi locked eyes, both of them knowing that this confrontation had been inevitable. "Well, cousin," Nnamdi sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "It seems you've been busy." Ikenna tightened his grip on the dagger. "This doesn't have to end in blood, Nnamdi. Let us go. We will never return to Umunna." Nnamdi laughed coldly. "Do you really think that I will let you walk away? You've shamed our family, our kingdom. You are a traitor, and traitors must face justice." As Nnamdi advanced, Amaka stepped forward, her voice filled with quiet defiance. "It's not Ikenna who has betrayed the kingdom. It's the curse. It has divided us for too long. We deserve to be free." Nnamdi's eyes flashed with fury. "You're nothing but a slave. You have no right to speak of freedom." But before Nnamdi could strike, a voice echoed from the cave's entrance. "Enough!" Onyedike appeared, flanked by a group of Amadi warriors. "The time for oppression is over. The Amadi will no longer bow to the Nwokike." The cave was filled with tension as the two sides stood at an impasse. Ikenna, Amaka, Nnamdi, and Onyedike, each of them representing the past and the future, love and hate, slavery and freedom. The fate of Umunna hung in the balance, and with it, the future of Ikenna and Amaka's love. The cave became a battleground of wills. On one side stood Amadi and the Nwokike warriors, proud, their birthright fueling their resolve. On the other stood Onyedike and the Amadi, tired of their chains, but filled with the fire of rebellion. Ikenna stood in the middle, his heart heavy with the weight of the moment. He had never wanted violence, but he knew that this was a fight for their freedom. Amaka's eyes met with his, filled with love, fear, and unspoken understanding. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Nnamdi sneered at the sight of Onyedike. "You think you can come here and make demands, you slave? You forgot your place." Onyedike's expression hardened. "It is you who forgot. The land belongs to all of us. We are not slaves because of our birth. We are slaves because you have made us so. But no more. The time of your rule is over." Nnamdi's face twisted with rage, and in a swift motion, he drew his sword, pointing it at Ikenna. "This is your doing, cousin. You and that slave girl have brought this upon our people." Before Ikenna could respond, Onyedike stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This has been coming long before Ikenna and Amaka's love. The curse has torn us apart for generations, but today, we will end it." The first blow came swift and unexpected. Nnamdi, filled with rage, charged towards Onyedike, his sword aimed for the elder's heart, but Onyedike was quick, deflecting the attack with the skill of a seasoned warrior. The cave erupted into chaos as the Nwokike warriors clashed with the Amadi. Ikenna found himself fighting side by side with Onyedike, defending Amaka as the battle raged around him. He parried Nnamdi's strikes, his heart pounding in his chest. Every movement was a struggle, not just for survival, but for the future of Umunna. Amaka, though terrified, refused to stand idle. She grabbed a falling staff and used it to defend herself, her eyes filled with determination. She had grown up a slave, but in her heart she knew she was meant for more. Nnamdi, blinded by his desire for power, fought with reckless abandon. "You've ruined everything, Ikenna," he shouted, swinging wildly. "The throne should have been mine." Ikenna's face grim as he deflected Nnamdi's blow. This was never about the throne. It was about doing what is right. Their swords clashed, sparks flying as the fight reached its peak. But even as the battle raged around them, Ikenna could see that the Amadi were holding their own. The years of oppression had hardened them, and now, in their fight for freedom, they were unstoppable. As the battle reached at its climax, Onyedike found himself face to face with Nnamdi once more. The two men circled each other, their eyes locked in a silent challenge. Nnamdi was younger, faster, but Onyedike had the wisdom of age and the strength of a man fighting for his people. In a swift move, Nnamdi lunged at Onyedike, his sword aimed for the elder's heart, but at the last second, Onyedike dodged the blow, knocking Nnamdi's sword off his hands. Nnamdi fell to the ground, gasping for breath as Onyedike stood over him. "Your time is over," Onyedike said, his voice steady. "The Amadi will no longer be slave." For a moment, Nnamdi's eyes flashed with fear. But just as Onyedike was about to deliver the last blow, a cry raged out from behind them. "Father, no!" It was Amaka. She stood at the entrance of the cave, her eyes wide with terror. She had always known that this day would come, but now, seeing her father about to kill, she couldn't bear it. Onyedike paused, his hand trembling. In the moment, he realized if he killed Nnamdi, the cycle of hatred would only continue. The bloodshed would never end. With a deep breath, Onyedike lowered his sword. "No more," he said quietly. "We will not win our freedom with more death." Nnamdi, still on the ground, looked up at him in disbelief. "You are a fool," he spat. "You will never be free." But Onyedike didn't respond. He turned and walked away, his heart heavy, but his resolve unshaken. The fight was over, and though the Amadi had won the battle, Onyedike knew that the true victory would come in the days ahead. Nnamdi's pride was shattered. The Nwokike warriors, seeing their leader defeated, began to retreat, leaving the cave in silence. Ikenna, battered and bruised, approached Nnamdi as he lay on the ground. "This is not the way things had to be, Nnamdi," Ikenna said softly. "We could have found peace." Nnamdi's face twisted with rage, but his body was too weak to fight anymore. "You've ruined everything," he hissed. "You and your slave." Ikenna shook his head, his heart heavy. "Amaka is no slave. She is free, just as we all should be." With that, Ikenna turned away, leaving Nnamdi to his fate. The rebellion had begun, and with it, the kingdom of Umunna would be changed forever. Days passed, and the news of the battle spread throughout Umunna. The Nwokike elders, realizing that the Amadi would no longer be suppressed, called for a peace talk. They had seen enough bloodshed, and they knew that if the kingdom was to survive, they would have to find a way to coexist. Ikenna and Amaka, now free from the chains of their past, returned to Umunna as symbol of hope. Their love, once forbidden, had become a beacon for their people. The Nwokike and the Amadi, though still wary of each other, began to work together to rebuild their kingdom. The elders all moved to the chief priest. He was the traditional and spiritual custodian of the law of Umunna. They inquired of him on how to break the curse that have held the Amadis for so long. The chief priest cleared his throat and then decreed, "By a king the curse was laid, and by a king the curse will be removed. Go, crown Ikenna the king, and let him bless the Amadi, and make both the Nwokike and the Amadi one kingdom again." So the elders did as they were told, and Ikenna was crowned, and he blessed the Amadi, removing the curse that was once placed on them, building a kingdom where all were equal, free from the curse of the past. And after the blessings, he proceeded to marry Amaka, the daughter of Onyedike. As for Nnamdi, he was exiled from Umunna. His thirst for power, his undoing. His name became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when ambition blinds the heart. Under the bright sun of a new dawn, Ikenna and Amaka stood together at the riverbank, the place where their love had first blossomed. The kingdom was healing, slowly but surely, and with it their hearts. "We've come so far," Amaka said softly, her hands in Ikenna's. Ikenna nodded, his eyes filled with love and hope. "And we will go even further together." As they looked out over the river, they knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, but they were ready to face them, side by side, as equals, as partners, as two people who had found love in the midst of chaos. And so, with the kingdom of Umunna on the path to unity, their love stronger than ever, Ikenna and Amaka began the next chapter of their life, a chapter filled with hope, freedom, and the promise of a future where no one would be bound by the chains of the past.